This is the Zac Anesbury Show.
Welcome. Today's podcast clip comes from an interview with Professor Scott Koslow from Macquarie University.
We'll hear them often talk about, say, speaking in French, and they'll go on, and then they'll say marketing, and it's almost in an American accent. And it's like, what? So, yeah, because it is such an American kind of concept.
Yeah.
And it's one of the fields in which the Americans have dominated across the planet. And, I mean, now there's plenty of folks who are not born in the U.S. who do marketing, and it's internationalized quite well. But the perspectives are still incredibly American, or at least I should say associated with America, even though I still think the ideas come from elsewhere. But the Americans were the big disseminators of what we pedagogically call marketing today.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that would probably be what most people would think as well with, you know, the spread of television shows like Mad Men or from an academic perspective, like the Journal of Consumer Research or the Journal of Marketing, those sort of old, sort of more prestigious journals, American in origin. I suppose at the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, we kind of see the concepts of the patterns that we look for in consumer behavior as applying in multiple different situations. And that's ultimately what we end up doing. Like we're not looking at just one brand for one category in one particular country and think, great, that's how consumer behavior works. We're looking at all of those brands with multiple different categories. And if it applies in Australia, then we'll say, well, can we find the same thing in America? Can we find the same thing in different parts of Europe? Does it apply in developing countries as well throughout Asia? And then we sort of know that there's this real reflection on how consumers behave. And that's why I think it's really interesting that you have this perspective as well that the difference between how academia works in the US and Australia is less different than people may perceive, I suppose.
Oh, yeah. Look, I've long been an advocate for standardized kinds of marketing practices and standardized advertising. I mean, certainly there's a level at which you have to localize ads, use local actors, local accents, and things like that. But, you know, if it's really a good strategy in the U.S. and you're facing a very similar environment in Australia, you can use and should use the same strategy. But there is a tendency that you find the local managers sort of their reason for existence is somehow or another saying that their market is different. So you have brand managers who will advocate, our market's different, our market's unique. Well, it might be that the brand faces a unique environment because there's a unique set of competitors and the positioning of the brand is different in various countries. This might be the case, but in many cases it's not at all like this.
Yeah.
There's a great deal of homogeneity.
Yeah, exactly. And we used to find that more so than we are now, but I think certainly within the last sort of 5 years or so, there was organisations that would come to us who were sponsors and even some who weren't, and their question would be, yeah, that's great. You're like a pattern such as like double jeopardy. You may find it holding for consumer good categories, you know, ones you typically find in a supermarket, but that won't apply for our brands, and that definitely doesn't apply for our category. And our response has always been, well, let's have a look at the data then.
And then you show that it does.
And then we show that it does. And, that we can actually provide them with some quite valuable insights, I suppose. Yeah. So you've sort of, you're, a professor at Macquarie University. But I think one of the sort of key things that I'd like to know is academia is quite a unique field in terms of it's probably not one that people grow up thinking that they'll enter into. No one that I've spoken to so far for the podcast has said, when I was a little kid, I strove to be, a researcher, and I had all of these questions that I desperately needed to have answered. Was that similar to you? Like, what did you sort of grow up thinking you wanted to be, or?
I still remember being sort of like 5 years old watching television, and I found the ads the absolute most interesting. They were far more interesting than the shows.
Yeah, great. Okay,
so I've always been an ad junkie, and that's it. It's just, I get to play with the the ads now. I mean, I don't work.
Hey guys, it's Zac Anesbury here with just a couple of quick reminders. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, then make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. There are plenty more interviews to come with some of the world's leading marketing academics and practitioners. You do not want to miss these. In the meantime, if you're looking for another way to connect, then follow me on Twitter at Zac Anesbury. That is ZACANESBURY for my take on the marketing issues of the day.